It was around noon when police were called to this apartment. That's where they found the body of the 25-year-old victim.
Corey's one of those people that when she walked into a room, people took notice.
I've been to a lot of bad scenes in my career, but nothing prepared me for what I saw.
He would stand outside her bedroom window at night and try to peep in.
He had created a relationship with her that existed solely in his mind.
I just want you to tell me the truth.
Right.
5 unique perspectives, 5 points of view, 1 murder.
Corey Parker was my best
I
friend.
was the on-call detective.
I was an investigative reporter at the Florida
The
Times.
investigative section.
I
in
was the
charge of
lead
this.
prosecutor.
My name is Amy Ladden, and Corey Parker was my best friend. Corey's one of those people that when she walked into a room, people took notice. Most of the people that met her, I think, felt immediately connected. I had seen Corey a lot going out, and we would say hi to each other. Then one day we just started talking, and we exchanged phone numbers, and we became friends. We definitely had an immediate connection. We had a lot in common. We realized right off the bat. She was very independent. I was independent. Corey was going to college. We both liked to go out and have a good time. She always had a smile on her face. And she's a really positive person. During Thanksgivings together, we do orphan parties, and that's basically people that didn't have family in the area. We would all get together. Her family was up in New York, and I think her plans were to go out the night before, bake some pies, and meeting everybody the next morning where the orphan party was gonna be. She really wanted me to stay that night, but I decided to go to my mom's a couple hours away. So I know she went out and met up with a few of our other friends that night. Last conversation I had with her, it was just normal chat, you know, told her to have a good time. I called her on Thanksgiving Day and didn't get an answer. Friday morning, the following day, her boyfriend David called me. David was hysterical. He could barely talk. He said, "Did you hear about Corey? Do you know what's going on?" And he said, "All I know is there's a lot of blood. We found Corey and there's a lot of blood." And I said, "Give me just a minute, I'll call you back." So I got off the phone with him and I called a paramedic friend of mine. I asked him if he could tell me what happened. He said no, but she was dead. I was in shock. I didn't believe it. I just didn't believe it at all. I never would have thought in a million years what happened actually happened. Corey was from Rochester, New York. When she moved to Jacksonville, I think she just wanted a complete change of lifestyle. She was drawn to the beach, but I think it was more so the peacefulness of the water, the casualness of beach communities, more so than the actual sun. She transferred over to the college up there. She was definitely dedicated to her education. Often we couldn't meet up until later because she would be doing a study group after getting up at 6 in the morning, running around, going to work. Corey worked as a server at Ragtime. It was convenient. It was a nice environment. There were cool people that worked there, and we used to hang out there afterwards. I think she was really comfortable with being a server. She made good money because of that. I think that people automatically felt connected to her, and even acquaintances felt like they were good friends with her because of the way she treated people. When she met David, it was a little bit different. There was an instant spark, which was unusual for her. Often she had to get to know somebody a little bit before she felt that intrigued by them. I remember her telling me he was special, and she was crazy about him. And she couldn't wait to tell me about it. I think at this point in her life, she was definitely looking for something a little bit deeper than just the appearance. Not only was he good looking, he also could handle everything that she threw at him. He was about 5 years older than her. And I think she was really grateful to have finally found somebody that could connect with her on the same level intellectually. I remember thinking they were super cute together. From the time they met, I believe until 2 days before this happened, they were together, you know, every night. When I got to the police station, there was probably 50 of her friends standing out in the waiting area. Luckily, one of the detectives came out and got me right away. She asked me a lot of questions. Obviously, my alibi, where I was, told me to be careful that every person was a suspect at that point. There were some questions like, do you know of anybody that might be upset with Corey? Do you know about an argument she may have had this week? What do you know about her current boyfriend? I felt so useless because I had no information. She didn't have any enemies that I was aware of. My biggest fear was if this happened to Corey, this could happen to me. This could happen to anyone else in our group.
My name is Eddie Bounds. I was the on-call detective with the Jacksonville Beach Police Department during the Corey Parker homicide. We're preparing Thanksgiving dinner all that day with family. Early in the evening hours, I received a call from the Jax Beach Police Department dispatch alerting me that there was a death scene that I was being called to on 4th Street North. Initially, Corey didn't show up for work, and the ragtime management became concerned and sent one of their employees to her residence to see what the problem was. The employee went around the residence and found her bedroom window actually ajar, and had to move the blinds aside to look into, to call out for Corey. And when he did that, he looked down. What he saw was Corey's body. I live about a quarter of a mile away. I responded quickly and spoke with Officer O'Neill, the senior officer on scene. We walked through the residence to the point of entry and exit, which was the kitchen window. You could see 4 fingerprints on the wall, bloody fingerprints. You could tell there were no ridges. Having seen scenes like that before, I knew there was gonna be gloves involved. I worked my way around the living room and then into the hallway and positioned myself outside of Corey's bedroom until my eyes could adjust to the darkness. After standing in the hallway outside of her bedroom for several seconds, I could make out Corey's outline of her body. I could see that she was laying on her bed. I've been to a lot of bad scenes in my career. I've been to a lot of classes that prepared you for these type of scenes, but nothing prepared me for what I saw when I walked into Corey's bedroom. It was surreal. The amount of injuries that she had sustained. It was such a vicious attack. Brutal beyond explanation. You can say and tell somebody, but to be there, to see it, to see what she has sustained. Once I realized how vast the scene was, I knew that we were going to need everybody available to respond to this scene and to conduct a thorough investigation. I called my wife immediately to tell her that I wouldn't be there for dinner. It appeared to me on first sight that she had been positioned in that corner of the bedroom with her legs spread and her arms wide. She was nude and her panties were rolled up off of her body and at her feet. The way she was displayed by the suspect. To me, it had sexual tones all throughout. A lot of the injuries were post-mortem. They were just cuts in her body with no blood, meaning that whoever killed her stayed with her for a period of time after she quit bleeding. And then took the time to not leave out of the least path of resistance, which would have been the front door. He went back out through a small kitchen window. So that was all a pre-planned event in my mind. It wasn't a accidental walked in on a burglary. Somebody really wanted to show whoever found Corey that he was angry. My first thought personally was that it was a relationship gone bad. It was going to be somebody that had a connection with Corey, a personal connection. In instances like this, where it is just a frenzy of stab wounds, it is common for the suspect's hand to come in contact with the blade and get cut. Till FDLE had gathered all of that evidence, we weren't sure if we were going to have the suspect's DNA. Time was going to transpire between what we had on scene and what was going to be discovered later through laboratory results. There was a lot of legwork involved, a lot of interviewing, repeatedly canvassing the neighborhood, and Ragtime was a business with over 50 employees. So we had our work cut out for us. At the ME's office, you turn off all the lights and they turn on an alternate light source. It's a kind of a bluish black light that makes fibers and any kind of microscopic evidence glow. I was hoping that whatever he had been wearing, his hair, sweat, blood, something had transferred from his body onto hers. And when they turned that alternate light source on, it emitted everything from fibers to blood. So there seemed to be so much evidence glowing from the body. To me, it was hope. It was hope in the case that something on her body that was being recovered would relate back to a suspect. When Corey's panties were unrolled, pulled apart, there was a forcibly removed hair follicle found inside them. When I say forcibly removed, when you lose your hair naturally, it falls off or falls out. But during a struggle, when hair is forcibly removed from your hair, it pulls the follicle, which has the bulb of DNA attached. It was a new sign of life in the investigation, knowing that when we found whoever was responsible, that hair had to have come from them. He would have to explain why and how his hair got into her apartment, rolled up in her panties and covered in blood.
My name is Paul Pinkham. I was an investigative reporter at the Florida Times-Union in Jacksonville. Corey's murder dominated conversations, news coverage, everything. People were starting to lock doors. Women would go out in groups together at night instead of alone because somebody was out there that did this, and nobody knew really if it would happen again to somebody else. Even with all the other potentialities that police had to look at, they kept going back to the fact that this was a crime of intense passion. The obvious thing to do would be to look at the people closest to her first as potential suspects or persons of interest. Corey was in a relationship with a man named David. He obviously was one of the first people that police wanted to talk to. Fortunately for David, he had a solid alibi. He was out of town visiting family for Thanksgiving. Police then turned to Corey's circle of friends and coworkers. Her friend Tiffany was the last known person to see Corey alive other than the killer. She, at the outset, talked to them fairly willingly. She remembered Corey leaving to go home, and she remembered going by the apartment or calling at some later point in the evening. In the course of that conversation, Tiffany essentially talked herself into being a suspect by revealing things that she knew that had not been revealed to the public, such as the incredible number of stab wounds, the blood, how Corey's body was posed. Tiffany was able to explain how she knew so much about the crime scene, and it was because she was dating somebody with the fire rescue who showed up at the initial call out and told her what he saw. The police moved on from Tiffany and, decided they needed to focus elsewhere. They went back to ragtime and they talked to Corey's coworkers. A couple of them mentioned a dishwasher at the restaurant named Eric, who they all said was just infatuated with Corey to the point where it was probably unhealthy. It wasn't in Corey's nature to be mean to anyone, so she would rebuff Eric's advances as gently as she could. But on his side of the equation, he was infatuated with her and, continued to make advances. It was a bit delusional from everyone else's perspective. One night, Eric decides, well, maybe I can win her if I just fix her dinner and then invite her over. So he goes to great lengths to fix this really nice, romantic kind of dinner, and then calls Corey, but she's got other plans. Obviously, she's out with her boyfriend. Eric was hurt by that. So police bring Eric in for questioning, and he thinks he can help because he was Corey's man in his mind, So he doesn't really shy away from anything they ask. He told the police that he loved Corey. He never hurt Corey. It quickly became clear to the police that this was way more than just a guy having a crush on a girl. Eric talked at great length about his sexual fantasies, violent fantasies about Corey, and it was almost as if he had created a relationship with her that existed solely in his mind, but was as real to him as reality is to the rest of us. At some point, their conversation took a dark turn into how he would have killed her if he had been the one to have killed her. All kinds of radar went up at that point. One of Eric's fantasies involved sneaking into Corey's apartment at night and waiting for her, and then ultimately stabbing her multiple times. Certainly, as Eric talked, the investigators got very, very, very excited that this may finally be our guy. Really, the last step now would be to get Eric's DNA and wrap the case up, which is exactly what they did. That takes time to run through the lab. The police had to let Eric go because they did not have enough to arrest him. His DNA sample had come back and did not match anything at the crime scene. So they had to go back to square one. The beach was blanketed with these reward posters. They were on every telephone pole, every tree. You couldn't really go anywhere without seeing it. And the hope was that something would shake loose. Or maybe 5 months after the posters went up, there was a group of people. They were sitting out on the dock and they were talking about the reward. And one of them said, "You remember that guy we worked with? He was acting really strange around that time and he lived near that girl. I wonder if he had something to do with it." One of them calls the cops up. They gave him a name. The name was Robert Denny. He had worked with them at the barbecue restaurant. Ironically, I believe he was a dishwasher as well. Police went and talked to Robert's boss. Robert was 17 at the time Corey was murdered. He lived in an upstairs apartment that had a balcony that overlooked her downstairs apartment. Robert had told them about this girl that lived in the apartments across the way from his, and that he used to masturbate while watching her. That got their attention big time. All of a sudden, Robert Denny became their focus. I mean, they're back in the game, so to speak. He was the creepy neighbor that we all fear.
I am Detective Sergeant William W. Carlisle. I was the supervisor in charge of the investigative section and in charge of this case. We got a tip from these three people. They said at the time he was just acting really strange. They'd been working with him for some period of time, and then all of a sudden, right after the victim was discovered, he's got to get out of town. He's crying. He's hysterical. We don't know where Robert's at this point, so we have to contact the sister who lived in Atlantic Beach and talk to her. And then she gave us additional information, which gave us reason for concern. Robert had been staying with her for a period of time, and he had, in her statements, become a night creeper, and he had a lot of pornography. He would stand outside, her bedroom window at night and try to peep in at her, and she was spooked by it, so she forced him out of the house. On top of that, the sister had revealed that his brother was serving time in El Paso, Texas for another murder where he, in fact, had killed a girl and stabbed her 97 times. You have a brother that stabbed a woman 97 times. You have a victim next door to Robert that was been stabbed 101 times. You're looking at it like, yeah, this is a good solid lead. We asked her, we said, well, where's Robert at? Because we had no clue. She didn't know exactly, but she knew that he had sent her an email. The lab was able to trace that email to a residence in Easton, Maryland. The first thing we did once we got all this information, we jumped on the phone to speak with the Easton, Maryland Police Department. We related to them, look, Robert doesn't know us. Let's call him in to the police department and approach him about potentially being a suspect in a crime that had occurred up there in Easton. We came up with this ruse that, look, the police chief's son was a victim of a battery, and you generally match the description of the suspect. When we conducted the interview, we were going to take him out into the garage for a smoke of the police department, and hopefully he'd leave the butt in the ashtray. We also gave him a bottle of water to drink from, and hopefully at some point he'd take a sip and we'd have his DNA. He put the cigarette butt behind his ear after he smoked it. He didn't put it in the ashtray. He never opened the water bottle. As a last resort, I put together 3 different letters saying, hey, we've approached you for a DNA sample. Although you are not interested in giving the DNA sample at this time, we need to record that we've asked you for it. Would you sign this? And then put these in these envelopes and lick them and seal them. He looked at the detectives that were in the room and he basically said, look, y'all have tried 3 times now to get my saliva on something. Is there anything else I can do for you? If not, we're done here. Basically, at that point, we had to let him go. We decided to set up surveillance on him to try and get a covert sample. We knew that he worked at a local computer store. We noticed that he would come out every 40 to 45 minutes and take a cigarette break. We were going to sit outside and get a DNA sample. Well, he initially started doing the same thing. When he would smoke the cigarette, he'd put the butt behind his ear and go back inside. Next day, we set up surveillance on him again, and lo and behold, he walks outside to smoke a cigarette, and out of the clear blue sky, he starts spitting on the ground. I scurried up there with my little swabs, and I could clearly see where the spit was resting on top of the rainwater. I scooped that up, and we drove that to the FBI crime laboratory. Two weeks later, the analyst from the FBI called me and told me that it was a match, that it was definitely Robert Denny. We were ecstatic. We were jumping up and down in the detective division. We jump on the phone to the prosecutor, who was Angela Corey, and we tell Angela, look, you know, we got a match, and we want to go get this guy. He's like, I'm not going to give you a warrant right now. I want you to get a denial from him that he knew Corey or had ever been in her apartment, because the DNA evidence was only as good as your ability to prove it should or should not have been there. All he really had to do was come back, you know, later on with a good defense attorney and say, I helped her carry her groceries in. And that's how my DNA got in her apartment. So it was critical that we get the denial. We felt like he was pretty savvy and that he would be, you know, smart enough to put together that we were there to trap him. So we formulated a plan. A detective was going to tell him, look, we've already found our suspect, and it's not you, but we have to ask you a few questions.
Did you ever see this guy in the victim's apartment?
I didn't even know the victim. She was behind us, if I remember correctly.
Did you ever talk to her? That's Corey Parker.
No.
Okay, and you never went to her apartment?
No.
We had our denial. We knew at that point he could not explain how his DNA got into her apartment. So we called back to Jacksonville. Angela had already typed up the warrant. We got the Easton PD to go with us over to the house and walked in and arrested him. You could just see the blood drain from Robert Denny's face, and he was just white as a ghost.
I'm Angela Corey. I was the lead prosecutor on the case of the state of Florida versus Robert Denny. You know, I prosecuted for 35 years, and my specialty, so to speak, was homicides. I kept pictures of my victims up all over my office because you can't forget about something this important, and you can't forget what her loved ones are going through. Just looking at her beautiful face, obviously the name Corey is special to me. It's my family name, my last name. And so there was just this drive to solve this case. It was a very exciting moment to see that we're going to be able to put Robert Denny in handcuffs and bring him to justice. You know, that finally we were going to have Corey Parker's murderer in custody. The best part of all of it was being able to call the victim's family and let them know. Once they arrested Robert Denny, he was no longer the cocky, I'm smarter than you person that he had shown himself to be. He started sobbing like a little boy. He couldn't catch his breath. He was hyperventilating. And I think he knew at that point that we had gotten him. He just didn't give any statements that would help us.
Robert, basically, I have enough physical evidence to charge you with murder. of Corey Parker, and I am going to charge you with the murder of Corey Parker. I'd like to give you this opportunity to explain to me what happened.
What happened? I didn't do this. I didn't murder anybody. You can't have any evidence. It's impossible because I didn't do it.
I just want you to tell me the truth, okay?
I swear to you, from the bottom of my heart, I'm telling you the truth.
I'm not sure that it was as real an emotion. There was absolutely no remorse. And it was just sort of a back and forth, and he couldn't have done it. And then our detectives brought up his brother, who was in prison for, ironically enough, stabbing a woman to death.
Robert, I just want to let you know that I'm aware of what happened with your brother and the situation with your brother.
That's my brother.
I understand
That is
that.
my brother.
He stabbed Corey Parker more times than his brother stabbed the young woman in Texas.
That's not my brother. He has nothing to do with it. You go next question.
Everything we asked him, he denied. Denied, denied, denied. When you looked at all of the evidence, along with his DNA, he was the only viable suspect to be the person who murdered Corey Parker. Robert Denny had not lived in the apartment directly across from Corey Parker for very long, so he had to have developed this interest in her suddenly. And then again, it could have just been that he saw her come home late that night and the idea occurred to him. Really, it's inexplicable how he focused on her and chose her as his murder victim, because he was in contact with a lot of other women. Whether it was an obsession, a rage, or just an I can get away with murder, I'm not sure we'll ever know, but I will always be grateful we don't necessarily have to prove motive in Florida. We just had to prove premeditation. My theory tends to be that he waited until after all the lights were out and went in through that window, and it was the same way he exited. We feel like she was asleep under the covers and he crawled up on top of her, and she began fighting immediately and never got off the bed once he started stabbing her. You could tell by the way the blood was spattered on the walls where she was found that she fought as hard as she could. One of the most stunning aspects of this case, and one that has always haunted us, was that most of the wounds were post-mortem. And the medical examiner believed that the killer just played with her afterwards. A continuous desecration of this beautiful woman's body. And that was just stunning to us. I've described it before as every woman's nightmare, being killed when you're in the sanctity of your own home, your own bed. He had to have planned this. There was no trace of blood between Corey Parker's bedroom and the lip of the kitchen sink. He had to plan very carefully with that amount of blood to not get a single bloody footprint anywhere. He said he had never been in there. We knew it was a lie. The DNA told us it was a lie, and it was the evidence we needed to prosecute him. We knew already that we were going to be able to take Robert Denny to a grand jury. We felt certain we could get an indictment. And then, of course, the excitement wears off when he fights extradition, and then began the 5-year battle to get him to trial.
When I first found out there had been an arrest and it was her neighbor, I asked probably 30 times in a row, are you 100% sure? Is this the person? Is there any doubt whatsoever?
We're so determined to seek justice for the victim. It's very difficult when there's not an immediate arrest, but because of the evolving nature of DNA and the numerous testing requests made by the defense, there was a lot of back and forth for years. We never gave up hope.
The moment I think everything actually hit me, it was in court, and seeing the killer 20 feet from me, and the way he just glanced around the room at everybody as if this was just a bothersome day for him. I didn't realize how angry I was until I saw how little he cared about what he did.
The state laid out a very methodical timeline of what happened from day one in this case.
We knew that, the defense attorneys that he was going to get were some of the best in the nation. And so, you got a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross.
Our approach was really to leave the jury with the impression that Robert Denny is the only person who could have committed this murder.
The image that the state created was someone that was so obsessed and someone that knew he couldn't have what he wanted, and so he took it away. He took her life.
We don't know whether Robert Denny was inside the apartment when she got home or whether he came into the apartment after she got home. But we do know that when Robert Denny attacked Corey Parker inside of her bedroom, she put up a fight that allowed us to have the evidence in the end.
In essence, Corey Parker solved her own murder. We put it together based on the physical evidence, but because she's the one that grabbed the hairs that we were able to get.
The only way his blood could have gotten on the lip of the kitchen sink and his hair could have gotten on her dead, bloody body was if he was the killer. And oh, by the way, he lied and said he had never been in there.
The defense came up with the story in trial about how Robert Denny had a cat and that the cat went next door into Corey's apartment after she was killed and it drug the evidence in.
There was no evidence the cat had walked on Corey's bed, which was completely bloody. So how could the cat have deposited Robert Denny's DNA? Once we rested our case after the 3-week trial, our prosecution team felt pretty good. But when the verdict came back 45 minutes later, you just get this moment of panic, this what if.
That's an awful quick verdict. I quickly run down the hall and get to the courtroom in time to see the jury come out, and everybody's on pins and needles.
They came back with a solid guilty verdict.
All I cared about was the fact that Corey Parker's mother and father and sister were on the front row of that courtroom to hear that Robert Denny had been found guilty.
He just tried so hard to pretend that he was this poor guy that everybody was pointing fingers at, trying to win over the jury. And, they could see through him.
Because it was first-degree murder and he was a juvenile at the time, the only sentence he could get was life. So, the jury verdict really was the end of the story.
There was nothing taken, there was nothing gained, there was nothing you can put in your hand and say, Corey Parker was killed because of this reason. Corey just happened to live next door to a monster. My 35 plus years as a law enforcement officer, it was one case that I took home and still take home.
She meant so much to so many people. I think about her all the time, and I think that's the only way that I can keep her memories alive is try to go back in my mind and remember where we were at then and where we might be today. I know we'd be friends, so